I'm going to share a quote with you from a famous world-changing technologist with a vision for the future of education. Your task is to guess who it is. Ready? I believe that generative AI is destined to revolutionize our education system, and that in a few years it will supplant largely, if not entirely, the use of textbooks. I should say that on average we get about 2% efficiency out of school books as they are written today. The education of the future, as I see it, will be conducted through the medium of generative AI, where it should be possible to obtain 100% efficiency. So, who do you think it is? Well, I played a little trick on you. I actually swapped in the noun phrase generative AI for the original motion picture. The famous technologist who said this quote was Thomas Edison in 1922. The reason I wanted to show you this is because I believe the situation we are in now is strongly analogous to the time when Edison first invented the motion picture, or when Philip Taylor Farnsworth invented TV in September 1927. Just imagine going back to the 1920s. Photography had already existed for decades, but the idea of a picture moving was something that nobody could have predicted. It was truly a technological and media revolution. The hype was real and justified. Everybody could see that it was an irreversible change in society and the start of a new era. But the question is, what happened when this technology was applied to education? Hi everyone, I'm Stanisław Pstrokoński. People call me Stash for short. I used to be a teacher, but I've been working in machine learning in the education technology industry for the past 5 years, and before that on open source education technology projects for another 5 years in parallel with teaching. I've been reading the education research literature since 2014, and in January 2016 I started a podcast called Education Bookcast, where I summarize education research, share key findings, and highlight connections and contradictions I see between different ideas. I recently had computational linguist Guy Emerson on the show to talk about large language models. I also have a separate podcast with Justin Matthews called The Pedagogcast, which is focused on answering teachers' questions. I'm very grateful to have been invited to introduce this panel discussion today on education and AI, specifically on generative AI. So, where were we? It didn't take long for people to start thinking about how this new technology would impact education. What was the potential of this powerful new technology? It was an exciting time. People started experimenting with this new and revolutionary technology. Before, all you could do was explain things to the students in words or show them static pictures. Now you could show them how things really looked and really moved. The US military got particularly interested. They invested tens of millions of dollars in training using video, and they also got some of the best learning scientists of the time to investigate how much people's learning had improved since the introduction of this program. And the scientists discovered that it didn't work. In 1947, psychologists William Hall and James Cushing created 3 versions of a lesson about reading a micrometer: a video version, a classroom version, and a paper version for self-study. They found that all 3 lessons were equally effective, meaning the medium in which information was presented had no effect. This trend in the research literature continued for decades. In 1983, Richard Clark published a review and meta-analysis of work from the past 4 decades showing that, as he put it, consistent evidence is found for the generalization that there are no learning benefits to be gained from employing any specific medium to deliver instruction. So what happened next? Most people probably weren't aware of the findings, but the hype did die down. Video was still used informally from time to time, but it wasn't entirely clear how to make it more effective. Researchers continued to investigate the impact of video and other multimedia on learning for decades, and continue to find no significant effect of the choice of medium on how well people learned. Nowadays, millions of people learn through multimedia materials, including podcasts, instructional videos, and online courses. This doesn't necessarily mean that these methods work better or that users are learning faster than they would otherwise. In other words, people are learning in different ways, but it's not clear that they're actually learning more effectively because of video. But there were still some researchers who tried to figure out how to make multimedia work better for education. After many fits and starts, the field, which is now known as instructional design or multimedia learning theory, finally discovered some systematic and scientifically replicable principles which made learning more effective using video. Most importantly, these principles were, number one, built off things that we know about how learning works, in particular relating to cognitive science, and number two, experimentally validated and replicated. So finally, we can make video more effective than other learning techniques. So how does this all relate to artificial intelligence and specifically generative AI in education in 2023? I have 2 points to make here. Number one, we need to focus on fundamentals, meaning focus on solving problems rather than chasing after shiny objects. And number two, think carefully before changing curricula. I'll go through these one by one. Number one, focus on fundamentals. For the first point, my contention is that we're in danger of making the same mistakes as we did with video, getting really excited at first and then not making the best use of these technologies further down the road. The missing piece is fundamental thinking, by which I mean asking questions like, what are we actually trying to do? How does that work? And how can this technology support that? And when will it undermine that? There's a striking analogy between what's been happening recently in education with generative AI and what Cal Newport describes in his book Digital Minimalism. Digital minimalists see new technologies as tools to be used to support things they deeply value, not as sources of value themselves. It's the opposite that we're seeing a lot of nowadays, people chasing a shiny new technology instead of thinking about how to pursue their fundamental goals. Number two, think carefully before changing the curriculum. There are also those who consider that we should change what we teach in light of new AI technologies, but I tend to disagree. Take calculators. They've been around since forever, and yet we still learn arithmetic in school. But there are good reasons for that. If you can't do basic arithmetic, how good can your number sense be? And how can you understand further mathematics without at least some sense of how to manipulate numbers? Another example is languages. You could just use Google Translate for everything, but how good will your human connection and cultural understanding be if you're always passing everything through a translation engine? And so, if you're thinking of replacing some school content because it can be done with generative AI, maybe we should also stop teaching children English and basic arithmetic. So in conclusion, when a new technology comes out, people are excited to use it. The trouble is, they don't know how. They get excited by the technology itself and often don't think about what their fundamental aims are and how this technology serves them. The road ahead is to make sure we base our use of technology on how people learn and the real problems we have, rather than basing it on which technology is the most exciting. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy the conference.